This new Titan Void Banner build will make it rain with Void Elemental Wells while giving your team a consistent 40% damage buff, as well as a debuff, not to mention the Elemental Well builds they may be running. With you playing a support side, your team could be outputting the best DPS in the game, depending on what weapons they are running. Not only that, but you're going to be getting your super back pretty quick, in which you wouldn't be able to if you weren't running this full build setup. Now this build, it's ideal for someone who wants to farm hard Grandmaster Nightfalls because the amount of damage you would take essentially helps while you're protecting your allies with the Banner Shield super. So in this video we're going to go over the full build setup, understand how it works and how you can master this specific build and be the true supportive god you are. Now this video is sponsored by USMMO. They sell Destiny 2 Silver at a much cheaper rate, so if you're looking for some sweet cosmetics for this season, why not check them out below and use my code DIVIDE for a discount when checking out. And now guys, if you find this one useful, be sure to leave a rating, like or dislike, comment what you think about this build, and now without further delay, bring out that banner. Now like always, if you do enjoy these build videos and you want to see more like this, then that full playlist is linked down below, or you can view a card on screen, somewhere. I think it's in the top right. Anyway, with this build, you will be using your Banner Shield super to protect allies, while also giving them a 40% damage buff. Now this damage buff used to be, I believe, 35%, which hardly ever got used because you could just throw down a Titan bubble and have that DPS buff, while also not losing a player for that DPS. But now with it being the highest DPS buff in the game, while also acting like it was before, makes this one of the best supers in the game when it comes to two things. Firstly, needing that extra DPS because a certain boss is tanky, and secondly, needing that protection from being insta-killed when dealing damage. So for example, you would use this in a situation like the Proven Grounds Grandmaster Nightfall, because you'd be taking so much damage to the point with Ursa's equipped that you'll get half of that super straight back right after using it, while also giving your two allies that protection from instant death and giving them that 40% damage bonus. An example of where you wouldn't use this build would be a simple strike or a dungeon, mostly being because the bosses don't melt you instantly and you can pretty much melt them down quickly regardless. So losing a player for DPS when it really isn't needed isn't recommended, because you could just throw down a bubble and give your team a 25% buff. But this build will be your saviour for most GMs and master content where you may be struggling to stay alive when you need to be dealing that DPS to a boss. Now how this build basically works is you'll be using all your abilities like your grenades, your melee and your barricade to spawn Void Elemental Wells. Your barricade will give you and your allies overshields as well as increasing reload speed, which is good for DPS. And then when you have your super, you'll use it to protect your allies and give them increased damage. And then when that super ends, you'll get up to the first 50% of that energy straight back, depending how much damage that shield took from enemies shooting at you. So this is a pretty good build setup to support your allies, get your super faster than normal, while also providing yourself and your allies with bonuses like increased DPS and Elemental Wells. So to set this build up, let's first take a look at the loadout. Now when it comes to the loadout, there's no restrictions, so you can use what you want, although if you want to maximize the effectiveness with this build, then you'd ideally use a void energy weapon such as the new Recluse, the funnel web. But any void weapon will do, as we are going to be using Volatile Rounds with that weapon to make ad clearing much better. But if you don't use Volatile Rounds, then using a bad juju ain't bad, as that will also help get your super energy much faster. As a support build, you could go with Divinity, although when it comes to DPS phases, the phase of that DPS would most likely end by the time you've finished with your Banner Shield, so using a Divinity is optional for when you don't have an active super ready. For your heavy options, I would either go with a Galley or Sleeper, but you really can use anything. When I'm playing with this build, I'd probably use a Funnel Web with either an Arbalist or a Kinetic Sniper, and then a Rocket Launcher for my heavy. If you want the best DPS though, you'd use an Izzy with an auto-loading rocket. For the exotic armour, we're going to be using the Ursas, and there's only one reason for that, and that is because Ursa's is the Titan exotic for the Banner Shield, so when you're going into endgame PvE, this is 100% worth using if you have a lot of incoming damage. Now other exotics you can use this build, although you won't get your super back anywhere near as quick as using the Ursas, but the other options are Aeon safe with the Sector of Insight. That'll give you heavy ammo when doing finishes on certain ads like champions and mini bosses, but right now we have Lucent Finisher, so you kinda don't want to use this in season 16 right now, as it's really not worth it. But you do also have this exotic here to produce more orbs for your allies, and casting your barricade will heal. But the last one I recommend is the Heart of Inmost Light, as this will pretty much give you infinite abilities one after another. This is what I use with my current Void build for the Titan right now, and you can see that separate video in the playlist if you want to go of that Water Dawn ability build. But for this build today, we are going to be using the Ursas. This reads, move faster while guarding when Sentinel Shield is active. Guarded damage converts to super energy when the super ends. Now you may notice that sometimes you won't get any super energy. That could be for a few reasons. The most common being either that ads or the boss didn't damage you enough, or you're stood inside a Warlock's Well of Radiance. Yep, that pretty much makes this pointless. If someone places a well down, stand just outside that well, or you won't generate super energy afterwards. If you don't have this exotic, you can use Energy Converter as a replacement to get that super energy, although you'd be using all your mod slots, which I don't recommend. Now for the subclass, we are a Void Sentinel Shield build for the Void 3.0, which we can block with and give our allies a 40% damage buff. And I am using a Rally Barricade so that allies can get an overshield, increased weapon reload speed, stability and range. And because it's a Rally Barricade, that cooldown is going to be much quicker. Strongly recommend. With this though, we have the Shield Bash melee, always good to suppress enemies and, well, yeet your allies off the map sometimes, but I've also got a Vortex Grenade with this build. For the aspects, we have Controlled Demolition. Hitting a target with a Void ability or Volatile Explosion makes them volatile, and further damage to that target causes them to explode, granting you and nearby allies health in the process. This aspect is like a mini Devour. It's no joke. I would always use this one when it's available. But the other aspect we have is Bastion, where casting your super grants an overshield to nearby allies, and casting your barricade does the same thing. Pretty OP, especially in Crucible. Now for the fragments, we are using Echo of Expulsion to cause enemies to explode when we get a final blow with our Void ability, Echo of Undermining to weaken enemies with that grenade, and then Echo of Reprisal, where final blows when surrounded by combatants grant super energy. If you want, you can swap this to the Devour, but with the aspects slotted in, I don't really feel it's needed, but it is down to your own preference. Moving to our main mods, we have Elemental Ordnance to spawn Elemental Wells with our grenade, Final Blows. Then we have Melee Wellmaker to spawn another Void Well with our melee, as well as Reaping Wellmaker to spawn, yet again, another Elemental Well when using our class and getting a final blow. Now this may seem excessive with the wells, but we're also using elemental armaments to spawn another on random void kills. Now with the amount of elemental well spawning mods, you'll be able to get your abilities back pretty quick, which is one of the reasons we are using this many mods. That and the fact that we are a support build, giving our allies these void wells, assuming they are running the meta Void 3.0 builds this season. Now you can change some of these mods out, you don't have to use them all, so if you want to change them, then I'd recommend putting on a Font of Might as a replacement to one, but we will be using as well as on Volatile Flow to make our void weapons cause some serious ad clearing. Now you might be wondering why Well of Tenacity isn't in the build when it's one of the best mods in the game. That's right, for me, I don't feel like I personally need that extra protection, but for someone who may die a lot or struggle to survive, I do recommend you use this and perhaps replace Reaping Wellmaker or Elemental Armaments. Anyway, for our normal mods, we have the Harmonic Siphon. Only use this if you are going to be using void weapons to generate orbs. And then I am using the Ashes to Assets for bonus super energy on grenade kills. Swap this to an Ammo Finder mod if you really need to, but for the gauntlets we have our champion mods that you may need. If you don't need champion mods, put on these cooldown ones for your class ability. But for the chest, we are running the Thermoshock plating to resist incoming arc and solar damage, as well as our reserves. But again, slot on what you think you need, whether that is a reserves mod or another resist mod. For the legs, we have Absolution for reduced ability cooldowns, along with our scavenger mod. And then for the class, we are using the Overload grenades and a Lucent finisher to spawn the heavy ammo when we finish a champion. Which if you don't have any champions, which is unlikely when you are using this build, then slot on a distribution mod instead. But for these stats, this is again down to preference, but for me I'd go with 100 intellect as a priority without using any stat mods, but 100 discipline or resilience for the extra cooldowns using stat mods. Otherwise, recovery is always the go-to. Now this build is a pretty fun one to use, but it's also about perfect timing. If you pop it out too early or too late, you may end up wasting it. And you also can't be standing in a well, so there are a few things to factor in when it comes to using this build correctly. But overall, it is a really good build and probably the best Titan Void build in the game that you should be using in all types of endgame PvE whenever you are playing with a team. So guys, that is your new Titan Void Sentinel Shield Banner Build for the new Void 3.0 subclass in Destiny 2 Witch Queen Season of the Risen. Next, as always, be sure to check out that playlist below for more top builds that you may be interested in for Season 16. And if you found this one useful or liked it, then be sure to hit that thumbs up as it really helps me out. But whatever you guys get up to, have a good one, and I'll see you this weekend for the next build.